Welcome, everyone. Our Friday afternoon series continues. This is Debbie McRae, and this is her first webinar for 2026. And it feels like it's been forever since we've been together because Christmas was around and Thanksgiving and all of those things. So we've had a lot of holidays. So I have my pen and paper ready, and I can't wait to hear what you've got for us today.
Well, awesome. I'm happy to be here. You're right. It's been a while since we've done a webinar. And so, as always, I have been observing what shows up in my office, and then I come up with the topics for my webinars. So, today we are going to talk about porn addiction, and this is geared towards those that are in recovery. So, I entitled it, Am I Really a Porn Addict? And if I am, how can I support my partner's healing? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So here's what I see and hear in my practice. Because I mainly work with betrayed partners and with couples who are working on healing after addiction, I typically hear this coming from the betrayed partner. My husband says, it's just porn. It's not like I slept with anyone. I hear them report, I don't even do it that often. You make it sound way worse than it actually is. Or I've stopped doing this. I'm in good recovery. I don't understand why you're still bringing this up. Or it's actually not cheating because it was with a real person. It's just fantasy. Or every guy watches porn. This is normal. And also, I might even hear in a couple session, the betraying partner say, she's overreacting. It's just no matter what I do, I can never get it right. It's not like I did anything like falling in love with somebody else. Or they might even admit, I didn't lie. I just didn't think to bring it up. So we're going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning of this webinar talking about porn addiction, compulsive porn addiction, out of control sexual behaviors around pornography. And what does that mean? I'm going to give you a list we're going to go through. We're going to talk a little bit about what gets in the way of your healing. And then we're going to talk about how it impacts the betrayed partner, followed up with some ways you as the person in recovery can help support your partner in their healing. So yes, pornography can be addictive. It can be compulsive, where there's difficulty stopping. And we notice that as this becomes out of control, there's consequences associated with this behavior. So I want to talk about a few of the consequences, and I want you to check in and see if any of this applies to you. There is relationship disconnection, and there's ongoing conflict with your spouse. You might even hear your spouse say to you that you're emotionally distant, or that you're irritable all the time, or that you're not willing to communicate. You might even notice that there's a breakdown in communication. There could be sexual intimacy problems. So there could be decreased desire for partnered sex with your spouse. There could be performance issues. There could be unrealistic expectations. Or you may even use sex as a reset without real closeness. So you might be using it to manage emotions. You might notice that there's an escalation and increased risk over time as to how much time you spend watching or using pornography. You might need stronger content for the same type of a dopamine hit. You might even be crossing your personal values. So you're moving into more risky behaviors as well. And then, of course, there's a mental and emotional health impact. So you might notice that there's more anxiety, definitely more shame, depression. You might find yourself isolating more, having poor sleep. And sometimes some of these can become unmanageable when you are working with out of control sexual behaviors around pornography. There might even be decreased motivation and focus in life in general. So let's go through a checklist right now about some of the signs that you might be dealing with pornography use that is compulsive, out of control, and even addictive. So one of the things on the list to consider is you have a desire to stop, but every attempt you do to try to stop fails and you continue using. You might continue using the pornography even though there's damage to your relationship with your partner or spouse, or it's impacting your work, it's impacting finances, and it's even impacting your health. You might have obsessive thoughts about when to use porn, how to use porn, even using euphoric recall at times. You might experience cravings or urges, like a feeling takes over. So there's this urgency to act out. Anxiety might arise if you think about not being able to use. You might hide the behavior. So this includes things like out and out lying, minimizing even to yourself that it's not that big of a deal that you're using pornography. And of course, secrecy is involved. Escalation can occur with those that have addiction. So they might find themselves needing more novelty, more intensity in the pornography for the same type of an effect. So I call it kind of climbing up the pornography ladder. Depression and anxiety might reside along with your addictive patterns. There might be sexual changes like I talked about before. There could be low desire. There could be dysfunction, sexual dysfunction. And this can contribute to the loss of connection with your partner, as well as there can be relational disengagement just because you have withdrawn. You're living in a world of secrecy, and so you're not making the efforts to connect with your partner. You might experience the inability to concentrate, poor productivity. You're dealing with lots of feelings of guilt and shame. And then you might even notice that you are becoming emotionally dysregulated. You're more prone to anger. You might yell, you might intimidate, you might even move into some rageful behaviors where you break or throw things. So here's what I want you to consider, that if it's harming your life, if it's ruining your relationships, especially with your partner or your spouse, if you can't stop, if you're using it to escape or manage emotions, maybe because of boredom, then you need treatment level support. So we'll talk a bit about that as we get into the webinar today. So let's talk about what are some of the barriers to the acceptance that, hey, I do have a problem with pornography. And we're going to discuss two things that I've mentioned in the past, and that is shame and denial. So let's start with denial. So denial is an interesting type of behavior because it's like an umbrella. So we're going to talk about different things that it encompasses. So with denial, you minimize and you rationalize. So this is where things like, it's not that bad, everybody does it, at least I didn't cheat. Those are all examples of how we minimize it in our mind. So as we minimize the impact of pornography on us and on our relationship and on our partner, it really blocks the urgency to seek real change because you are making it smaller than it actually is. So when I think about stepping out of denial, I think about willingness. And willingness really is, am I willing to do whatever it takes to get better? Is there no resistance? Am I willing to break through denial and really look at the situation as it truly is? Another thing that denial does is it kind of splits the addict and their life into compartments. So they have like a secret porn life, they have a normal life. Sometimes this is hard for a betrayed partner to even comprehend because they know that their partner loves them, but how could they do this to them? How could they have a secret life? Maybe even how could I not see it? The problem is with splitting and compartmentalizing our pornography use is that it keeps you stuck in hiding instead of stepping into honesty, into that openness, into that transparency. Another thing that denial does is typically some of the symptoms I see with denial is there's a lot of blame. So we can avoid responsibility if we stay in the pattern of blame. We can not accept ownership of the fact that we're doing something that is not only hurting us, but our partner. And oftentimes when you're in denial, you can even blame your betrayed partner in order to stay in that denial. Another thing denial does is it avoids any detail and accountability for the ways that not only the pornography has impacted you, but how denial is impacting you and your betrayed partner. So here's some denial behaviors. I would consider deleting your history, lying by omission, forgetting because you don't really want to tell the truth, the full truth. maybe even only sharing partial truths. I call that trickle truth. So what happens is when a betrayed partner is experiencing these type of denial behaviors, it actually deepens the betrayal trauma for them. It reduces their safety, and it's going to increase conflict between you and your partner. Another thing denial does is it resists support and it resists recovery structure. So you might have an attitude of, I can handle it myself. I really don't need a therapist. I'll just watch some webinars. That will help me. I'll get a book on it and read a book. Well, the problem with this approach is it lacks structure. The structure that recovery that includes things like boundaries around your acting out, which would include sobriety plans, having a sponsor and going to 12-step meetings, getting the support you need, whether it's with a group or at 12-step, or even having a CSAT therapist or a therapist that's qualified to help you with this. And then you don't put structure in place for relapse prevention. So there's something about putting a structure in place that assists with accountability that helps recovery become much more successful. So the second thing I talked about that gets in the way of accepting the fact that we might have out of control pornography behaviors is shame. So the interesting thing about shame is shame causes us to believe that we are disgusting, that we are broken. And so that's what oftentimes those that are using pornography deals with. And it often can fuel their acting out because they want to numb the shame. So I'm going to act out. It helps me manage my emotions that are around shame. Shame also causes the betraying partner to hide and even withdraw. So some of the behaviors you're going to see when they're hiding or they're withdrawing is there's more stonewalling. There's more isolating. I've had betrayed partners share with me, I knew something was up because he was always going off and not being a part of the family. So when you hide and you withdraw, it really makes repair and emotional safety harder for the betrayed partner. Shame also blocks empathy and accountability. So the addict becomes so focused on feeling bad that what happens is in order to manage it and deal with it, they become defensive. And again, it pairs with denial. So the betraying partner will oftentimes turn the table. And this shame really prevents them from having empathy for the betrayed partner. It also triggers defensiveness and anger. So oftentimes when shame triggers us, we sense a threat in our nervous system. We then move into things like minimizing and blame shifting, and it shows up as a power struggle oftentimes between the betrayed partner and the addict partner. The other thing shame does is it makes vulnerability really, really feel dangerous. So when our shame tells us not to show up and be our authentic selves, then the addict partner is going to avoid talking about things like struggles and urges and even slips. And what this does is it slows down the recovery process. It slows down the momentum and it sets you up for relapse. So during this time, when you are not accepting the fact that maybe pornography is an issue, or when your betrayed partner finds out that you've been using pornography, I want to talk a little bit about what their experience is like so you understand. So we're going to talk about this briefly. You need to understand that the moment of discovery or disclosure, that there is an immediate attachment injury and trust is gone. So the betrayed partner sees pornography use as a violation of the relational agreements that you had around sexual exclusivity, honesty, and transparency. So the discovery or disclosure of porn leads to this profound rupture in the attachment, which then causes the betrayed partner to feel unsafe. They will now lack trust, and typically they start to pull away. The second thing they experience is there's a threat to the relational and sexual safety in the relationship. So, like I said previously, they're feeling like the relationship is no longer secure. This causes then their nervous system to move into fight, flight, and freeze. So now they're constantly on high alert. So this is when we talk about betrayed partners getting triggered. It's because of that lack of safety that they're experiencing in the relationship. Betrayed partners also experience shattered reality. So what they thought their life was isn't actually what was happening. So when they learn about hidden or secret sexual behaviors, it really destabilizes the betrayed partner because they can't figure out what is real, what is true, what is reliable. So this results in a lot of confusion and shock. And like I mentioned earlier, it can move them into hypervigilance as they're working on trying to put the puzzle pieces together to figure out what their reality truly is. So oftentimes you'll see them move into those safety-seeking behaviors of things like seeking out information, asking a lot of questions. Maybe those questions are asked over and over again because they're just wanting to understand what their life truly is in this moment, now that they have all this new information. Even the betrayed partner experiences shame and self-blame. Oftentimes, they blame themselves for their partner's pornography use. They see it as personal inadequacy. They'll move into that belief of, I'm not enough. They also feel a loss of agency, and there's a loss of informed consent because their partner didn't conceal this pornography behavior. They felt like that if it happened in the early stages of the relationship, even pre-marriage or pre-commitment, that it took away their ability to make a choice. And so they feel very powerless. And then, like I've mentioned, we've got this nervous system activation that happens. So if there's ongoing secrecy, if the disclosures are repeated, or if they're trickle disclosures, it creates sustained fear and anxiety. So their nervous system is either going to be in a really high state of alert, or they're eventually going to be so overwhelmed that they're going to shut down. So betrayed partners, when they're in this nervous system activation, will also have a lot of ruminating thoughts. They're going to experience a lot of emotional dysregulation, and you're going to notice that they're very reactionary with their behaviors. So how can the addict partner support the betrayed partner in their healing? So the real important thing to remember at all times is the betrayed partner needs to feel a sense of safety and security in order for them to move towards you. So they're constantly questioning that in their mind. Most oftentimes it's very unconscious, but they're constantly looking to see if you're safe. So I'm going to discuss a few areas, some specific things that you can do to create this safety. I want you to think of these as commitments to your partner's healing rather than efforts to control. Because what we want to do is we want to take on the attitude of, I'm going to help my partner heal. And as they heal, there's more safety. And when there's more safety, then there's more connection. And we heal through relationship and we heal through connection. So oftentimes I have betrayed partners report to me that the betraying partner will say to them, quit asking me questions about my recovery. My recovery is mine only. You need to just get on your side of the street and do your recovery. But I really want to reframe it to it being our recovery, that we're doing it together and we're sharing as we do it. So here's 15 boundaries that you can put into place to help. The first one is you've got to commit yourself to radical honesty. This is really hard when you're not used to showing up. So this requires openness. It requires transparency. It requires that you have boundaries like, I will not lie. I will not omit information. I will not minimize my actions. I will not manage the truth. And if you're unsure about what information to share, then you'll say so and you'll ask specifically what your partner needs to hear and you'll provide it. The second boundary that you need to do to support your partner's healing is you need to make sure that you have boundaries in place around technology. So it would be things like no private browsers. It would be like not putting apps on your phone without the betrayed partner knowing. So the boundaries might look like, I will not use private or incognito modes. I'm not going to have secret folders or files. I'm not going to have hidden accounts. I'm not going to download apps or have apps without my betrayed partner's knowledge. And then you're going to make all of your accounts on your phone, everything from email accounts to whatever you might have stored, open and available for your betrayed partner if they ever ask. You want to be honest. You want to show it. And this is really a difficult one. But again, it's all about openness, honesty, and transparency. When that happens over time, it creates trust for the betrayed partner. To kind of follow along with what I was just talking about, there needs to be device transparency. So the betrayed partner needs to have access to your passwords and to your devices until accountability is shown and trust can be rebuilt. So with this, I like to work with betrayed partners, not that they're sneaking around and looking at your phones and getting on with your passwords, but that we get to a place where there's just this, I'm willing to share whatever. And I do like the betrayed partners to ask to look so that you're doing it together. The fourth thing is to have accountability software. This is a big one. Betrayed partners feel so much safer when you use an agreed upon filtering or accountability software and you put it on all devices, you keep it on, you keep it active. But partnered with that, you identify an accountability partner, not your betrayed partner, who's going to receive any data that shows that you might be on those devices and on websites you're not going to be, and that person will hold you accountable. Another boundary is that if there's any kind of slips or relapses, there's immediate disclosure. So a lot of couples will determine how soon do you need disclosure. Do we have a 24-hour time limit? Do we have a 12-hour time limit? So agree upon the time frame. And then what you're going to do is you're going to approach the betrayed partner and let them know you've had a slip. My recommendation is that as you sit down and share the slip, that you also ask if it's a good time. You make sure the betrayed partner is well fed, well rested, and grounded. And you also have a plan of action put in place so that this relapse or this slip will not happen again in the future. So maybe you have some type of a relapse prevention boundary that you share with them when you're also sharing about the disclosure. When I talk about that particular way to approach the slip with betrayed partners, they love it. They really feel like it's going to create safety for them. And I do find when it happens that way that they stay far more grounded. The other thing that you need to be aware of is have a boundary around your shame. So name it. Name when you're in your shame rather than turning it around and dumping it back on the betrayed partner and blaming them. So have boundaries like when my shame shows up, I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lash out. I'm not going to move into saying I'm such a terrible person. But instead, if you're dealing with shame, let your partner know and then turn to one of your support persons and let them know I'm working with shame. Here's what my shame wants me to do. And have that support person help you stay present and work through your shame. Because remember, when we're in our shame, we avoid accountability. And so shame is such an important part of the healing work that you need to do. So the next boundary is have an emotional regulation boundary. So that means you're going to be constantly aware of what's going on internally for you. So put a boundary in place like, I'm not going to escalate into anger or intimidation or name calling or blaming. And if I am triggered or my system is activated, then I'll call a timeout. I'll step back, you get myself regulated, and then return and do a repair. So whether that repair looks like being more open, more honest, taking accountability, validating the betrayed partner's feelings and emotions, and even stepping into doing some empathy. Another boundary, number 9, is a sexual integrity boundary. So with this in relationship to the betrayed partner, it would be things like I will not pressure my betrayed partner for sex or for any kind of reassurance in this way, that I will respect when my partner pauses, needs to take a break, says no, or even has a change in their sexual boundaries. So there are times where betrayed partners need to take time away from physical and sexual contact. in order to establish internal safety. The next boundary, number 10, is that you need to have a boundary around triggers. So, and as these kinds of triggers I'm talking about are when your betrayed partner is triggered. So when your partner is triggered, you're going to have to work on putting on your shame shield, right? Or your shame resiliency suit. And you're going to have to sit with the betrayed partner with empathy and with steadiness, staying really grounded yourself. So when you're doing this, that means I've got to step out of defensiveness. I can't say to my partner, you need to get over it. You can't turn it back on them and tell them all the things that they've done to hurt you and that they're acting ridiculous. And I know we do that because we're trying to protect ourselves. But if we can always remember that the goal is that if I can support my partner here, when they're triggered, I am actually creating more safety for them. And the more I do that, the more I am rebuilding trust with them. Boundary 11 is that you need to have a financial integrity boundary. So with this, you maintain transparent financial practices. You don't spend money for acting out. I know with pornography nowadays, you don't often have to pay for it, but if there have been any times where you need to be very open, honest, and transparent about it. Another thing you need to consider in boundary 12 is that what kind of boundaries am I going to put in place in my environment or in my community? So that means that I'm going to avoid going to high-risk spaces or places, right? I'm going to build protective routines. That might be I drive down certain streets because I know they're safer. I'm not going to go to certain places and certain establishments. It's going to be like in your home, that there's going to be a phone-free bathroom or bedroom, that you're going to have a predictable schedule, and that you're not going to isolate within the home, especially when the family and your partner are there. Boundary 13 is taking ownership. So that just means that you validate that what I did harmed you, right? Take accountability. When something happens, your partner brings it to you and says, you didn't tell me the truth, just say clearly that I lied and I hurt you. This is on me. Don't make excuses and don't blame. And then through your actions, show your betrayed partner that you're doing it in a healthier, better way and that you're doing it more consistently. So you might even ask them, so what can I do right now to help you feel safer? What do you need me to do to make the repair? And so get curious with what you can do to create that safety for your betrayed partner. So boundary 14 is around empathy. This means you're going to listen without defensiveness. So you're going to, again, put on your shield if you have to. I use the analogy of pretend that you're holding space by imagining you've got a bowl and your partner's feelings and emotions are going to go in that bowl. If you're afraid they're going to be absorbed, and you're just going to really listen for the emotions, for the feeling words. You're also going to notice what they're telling you. And then you're going to reflect back and say, I hear you saying that when I don't initiate check-ins, like I've said I would 3 times a week, that it makes you feel unsafe and that you don't matter. So remember, if you can't do that and you start to get triggered, you get defensive, then you can always ask to take a pause, let your betrayed partner know that you're overwhelmed, that you need 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and that you'll come back and continue listening. Also, get familiar with the AVR formula for empathy. So this comes from Carol Sheets. So we're going to acknowledge, the A stands for acknowledge, the betrayed partner's pain and what they're dealing with. The V is you're going to validate the emotions that they're feeling. And the R is you're going to reassure them about your recovery, about your efforts for rebuilding trust, or for whatever they need reassurance around. And then the last one is have a boundary about being willing to do a formal therapeutic disclosure if that's what the betrayed partner needs. So with this means you're going to work with your therapist. You're going to provide all the information. You're going to turn over all the cards, and there's going to be no more trickle truth. So, with this disclosure process, you are going to not only do the disclosure, but then you're going to stay present with the betrayed partner while they share their impact letter in step number 2. And then you're going to follow up in step number 3 by providing that accountability restitution letter. So, these are the types of things or boundaries that I hear betrayed partners come in and repeatedly tell me that they need in order to feel safe. So, in conclusion, I just want to kind of circle back around and just remind you that if your pornography use has become compulsive or out of control, the most loving thing that you can do for yourself and your partner is to get honest, to get accountable, to get the support you need, and then do your work. And as you're doing your work with the proper therapeutic help, share that work with your betrayed partners. Then also remember that the boundaries we talked about today, it's not about punishments. They're really about creating safety rails for your betrayed partner. They protect not only your recovery, but also your betrayed partner's healing. And when you think about honoring and doing these boundaries and being consistent with these boundaries, if you can do it with the attitude of creating a win-win situation, this really shifts how you look at following through on these boundaries, not only for your recovery, but also in the ways you can support your partner's healing. So remember, rebuilding trust with a betrayed partner, it takes time. It's one step at a time, one recovery action at a time, and being consistent over time. But in the end, remember what we're trying to do is to repair attachment, create safety, and ultimately create really healthy connection. So that's what I have today. I hope that it has provided you with some ideas that are helpful.
It's great stuff. I was thinking when you started off, and yes, the defensive, the denial, all of that, and that is this is awful right now, and I just want it to stop, and it doesn't change anything. So then it's going to just keep looping around. You've got a trade partner who's distressed, upset, hurt, triggered, and then your addict partner is saying all the things. When are you going to get over this? I don't do it. It isn't as bad. Whatever they're saying, and it just keeps doing that loop around. So what you're doing is inviting. If we are willing to go through the uncomfortable, hold our bowl out in front so that we can you would not absorb, but we can take those emotions and look at them and listen. We can stop like being on that loop. Like it's just that
Mhm.
keep going, or we can go, we're going to do some hard stuff because we haven't ever done it before. It's going to be new to us, but we have the hope, like you said, the goal of, we can have a really good relationship where this doesn't have to keep happening. It'll get slower and less frequent. And then, yeah, but like stuff is going to happen. But ultimately, it shifts everything in such a good way. It's just hard, especially for an addict who's been using whatever, to dissociate, to compartmentalize, to be willing to hold the space for the uncomfortable emotion. And you talked about the shame and partners taking on shame. And I thought, that isn't just self-shame. There's outside messages, that will reaffirm, oh, all men do that, or what's wrong with you? I mean, I
Yeah.
hear that unfortunately from therapists that are not trained in this arena. Unfortunately, occasionally some that are, but usually it's those that aren't trained in this, that it's just like, well, that whole minimization of, about how it's negatively impacting a relationship and a betrayed partners. Like I can't compete with images online, and what's like I'll never win. So the self blame, the self shame, and the insecurity that is created about self-image, is really apparent too. I was
Mhm.
thinking, you're talking about the accountability, and I'm talking because you guys aren't asking questions, because I have a whole bunch of notes on Debbie's stuff, but I'll quit if you guys ask questions. So type them in the Q&A. But you were talking about, the need for connection and getting outside, because yes, I have a friend who has talked about, like, in 12 step, he thought he'd be his own sponsor. He said, worst sponsor ever is, and I was like, yeah, we're the ones that get us into this stuff. I also recently heard about somebody who was using AI for for their accountability. And again, I know I was like it doesn't, I'm sure that there's some little, it's better than just acting out, but on the other hand, it's still the lack of connection. How are you ever going to practice having these moments with people if you're always doing it with an AI thing? So do I think AI has a place in certain things? Yes. Do I think it's a good sponsor accountability and your answer to these issues? No. Like we really do need those connections. Oh, good. We have a question. I told you I would quit. Okay, and I did put. This is a good question, but I did put. Debbie talked about boundaries a lot, and that was, around the relationship and the betraying partner, and she's got an online work group that starts on January 20th, so next week in 75 minutes, 6 weeks. There is still room. So please, I put the link in there. If you're watching this afterwards on the Seeking Integrity under work groups, you'll see that link. So consider that this is on trust and connection.
Yeah, and can I also put a plug in that yes,
Please.
we talk about boundaries, but there's so many other aspects of healing from betrayal that comes into the boundaries group. And we also work together on talking about really difficult situations in your life and how can we create safety around that for you using boundaries. So yeah, we're going to really focus on that, creating trust. How do I know I can trust? And then connection. How do I know connection is safe? So I talk about a lot of challenges that you come up against and how you might handle it. So just want to put that plug in.
Yeah, and this will be far more personalized than typing a question in here, because you'll get to know Debbie and she'll get to know you, and you'll be sharing with other people, and somebody else in the group will ask a question and you'll go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So those work groups are just so helpful. Many good therapists recommend them, whether it's the Sex Addiction 101 or Porn Addiction 101, for their clients, or the attachment wounds, healthy boundaries, healthy intimacy, why men struggle to love, inner child. All of those are on our site and are offered at varying time frames. Sex Addiction 101 is every month, but the others, on a basis based on demand, etc. So a less frequent, let's put it that way. So consider those. You can always email tami@seekingintegrity.com if you've got questions, or you can call the main line and somebody at our intake department will help you. Okay, so the first question, we want more, would be, how do I tell that he stopped gaslighting me?
We do talk about gaslighting in the boundaries group. So let's just talk a little bit about gaslighting. So, gaslighting is a term that we use to kind of indicate when somebody is being deceitful, they're not telling us the truth. They can do it in a variety of different ways. Or they're not providing the full truth. And there's an element of, really you, the person who's living with this individual, starts to question their own reality. So it's so hard to know. So let me talk about what gaslighting does, and then let's talk about how we can tell if the person stopped, right? What are some things we could do to kind of work through and identify if maybe we're seeing them stepping out of that? So when there's gaslighting, some of the things that I'm going to see from the betraying partner are going to be things like I come to them with a situation I'm very concerned about, and they're really good at flipping and turning the tables and making it about me. So now the focus is no longer on me, on them and their behaviors. I now become the victim. So we often talk about DARVO, which is an acronym that really represents what I just described. So you go to them with a concern, they deny it, right? They then attack you, and they reverse the victim, which is you, and now make you the offender. So when we see the turn the tables, that's one of the things. This can be very crazy making, because every time I go to you with a concern, now you're flipping the tables. I'm the problem and I walk away apologizing. This just is like hard to believe. Another thing that they do with gaslighting is sometimes they just won't even talk back to you. It's just like you talked and they just gray rock you, or you ask them a question and they respond with a question, so they deflect, and so you never get all of the information that you need from them. So you're always feeling like there's a sense of, I don't have all the information. There's that, like I talked about, that resistance, right? That unwillingness to share. The other thing they do is they'll just out and out lie. And with this, what I often see is betrayed partners will come and tell me that my intuition told me something was up and he denied it, and I went against my own intuition. So that's another thing that happens to the betrayed partner when they're gaslit. The other thing I've seen is the betraying partners out and out lie and say it never happened, and the betrayed partner has proof, literal proof. That's all gaslighting. So, and there can be other different examples of that. But how do I know if my partner's no longer gaslighting me? Well, you're going to see some of the things I talked about in today's, webinar of as far as their behaviors go. But you can own your own reality around it. So this is something, an exercise I have my betrayed partners do at times. Okay, how do I know if they're really telling me the truth? How do I know that they're not just gaslighting me? So what you're going to do is you're going to create 3 columns on a sheet of paper. Okay, one column is going to be the data. So this is the data of what I see my partner doing, what I hear them saying. Okay, so very factual. Just make that list of facts. Okay, then in the second column, you're going to write out, okay, when I see them do this, I hear them say this, right? Here's my perception. Here's what I think about it. Here's my story about it. Okay, so it's your interpretation of the data. So you're going to go through all those different points and add, here's what I think of it, or here's my story about it, here's how I view it. Okay, the third column, you're going to put, when I see and hear this, and I tell myself this story, here's the emotion it creates. Okay, so if you've got a list of emotions that are things like fear, feeling crazy, uncertain, scared, angry, it's probably an indication that your partner is possibly gaslighting you. If you see words like safe, calm, I have clarity, feeling like I have clarity, you've got things like that, then there's an indicator that they're being open and honest. I think another thing that you also see is you will see them be congruent with their actions. So what they say they're going to do, they do. You might even notice that as you're watching them with other people, that they are also portraying the truth as the truth. So you're not hearing them exaggerate about certain things or minimize certain things. To me, that would be another thing that I would look for as a sign that if they are really open with everybody, they're radically honest with everybody, then it's a pretty good indicator that they've stepped out of gaslighting. So just off the top of my head, that's some of the things that I think of. Another thing you can do, and I've had clients kind of sit back and just kind of start observing. And with that observing, you're going to start noticing things like, are they denying things? Where's their denial? And then journal it. Kind of keep track of it. If you see them turning the tables and darvoing you, then write down and keep track of it. And then if you also have your intuition show up and you go to them and say, hey, I feel like something's off, like maybe you're struggling with your recovery, and they say, no, I'm not. I'm doing just fine. And then a month later, you find out that they've had a slip. Write that in your journal so that you don't forget, because sometimes as betrayed partners, we have so much going on in our internal world, right? So many emotions. Then we're trying to help with the family and we're trying to work and we're trying that sometimes we just, because life is so busy, we overlook some of these things. So you can also kind of keep a record if that's going to help you kind of keep all the data together as well.
Well, even for keeping the record, uh, because it's easy to question yourself and go, did that really happen? Or, so having that and having the, yes, I wrote it down in black and white, this is what it was and the date it happened. So I have that information. And the other thing I think that does is then I don't have to keep thinking about it in my head. Like now it's on paper, it's in a safe place. I'll be able to return to it. I don't have to try to remember it. I just think that can be helpful from that standpoint as well. I was thinking one of the topics when we did a webinar on gaslighting was intent and impact, and lots of betraying partners get caught in the, well, I didn't mean to da 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 da, but the impact was still. And so I think when you start to see, like you said, the congruence, and when you can see that their intent and the impact are aligned, that is helpful. But I think the biggest thing is, you get that if you've been told often for years that whatever you thought was wrong, don't believe it. But I think if you can go, I'm going to trust that little niggle, and I'm just gonna trust that there is something. I don't have to figure it all out right now. But I love that you talked about journaling, because journaling gets it down on paper, and then you can see its actions. Though it is absolutely, we say this all the time, if these lips have been lying for decades, then it's not going to be oh, now I'm going to tell all the truth and I'm so good. And the more they're saying, this is the biggie, the more they're saying, I got this, I'm like I have no impure thoughts, whatever. I mean, like the whole, like that absolutes, like I am completely in recovery, like that would be a massive red flag, because this is a lifelong journey, and stopping these patterns that we've been doing for a long time, is going to take some time. So I would not anticipate that gaslighting would stop immediately, just like lying doesn't stop immediately and it won't happen again. But hopefully, we're starting to catch ourselves and go, that wasn't the whole truth. Like I told you part of it, but there's lies of omission. I was afraid of your reaction, not an excuse, but I'm just owning, like Debbie talked about, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm owning, I'm in my shame. The more we're able to own, like that's called communication. I'm able to tell you where I'm at with things, and I'm going to take care of me so that I can show up, as an adult, in this relationship. So mostly, don't doubt yourself. Watch what your eyes see, not what your ears hear. So,
Mhm.
okay. So before D-Day, he presented me with marriage issues. Then D-Day happened. I don't know what are real issues and what was Darbo. Um, and then it continues, how much responsibility do I need to take to address marital issues? Ask how he's doing, etc. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, this is a great question. Thank you for
Yes.
asking that. So, just to kind of set the stage for the answer to this, I want to talk about, when we have these hidden behaviors like, sex addiction, porn addiction, out of control sexual behaviors that have been kept from the partner, right? We are dealing with an attachment or an intimacy disorder. So it's really hard to go into couples therapy when you don't have that knowledge and you're told that there are marriage issues. Because when you actually go into work on those marriage issues, what's at the core of it is not being addressed. What we're really addressing is some of the symptoms that result from your partner's sexual acting out. So I have seen this. In fact, just recently I had somebody share with me that this is part of their history is they went in because they had what, their partner said were relationship issues or marriage issues. And the betraying partner was pointing the finger at the betrayed partner, the betrayed partner that didn't know they were being betrayed, and made the issues about them. Well, remember, those that have the addiction, right, or the intimacy disorder, right, have a hard time with closeness, have a hard time with healthy connection. Healthy connection means we've got vulnerability, right? We're open, we're radically honest, we show up with empathy and validation with our partner. And when that's not happening in a relationship, of course, there's going to be problems with attachment. There's going to be a problems with communication. There's going to be problems with how you just interact on a daily basis. But the unfortunate thing is they often point the fingers at the betrayed partner. Sometimes they make it sexual, right? It's that you're not having enough sex with me, or you're not having sex the way I want to have sex. And that's really hard because if you don't know that they're sexually acting out in other ways, right? It's unfair to you. So yes, the answer to that is there can be some Darvo in this, right? They've now turned the tables and made you the problem when in reality, the true problem is not being addressed. So I've had partners who said, yeah, we went to marriage counseling for a year and a half, and I was told I was the problem by my unbeknownst to me, betraying partner. And then once this all came out, we finally got the right therapist who understood betrayal, understood that this is an attachment intimacy disorder, and then started working on getting to the root of it. So, how much responsibility do you need to take to address marital issues? Well, I think you can take responsibility for how you react to situations, right? And I talk oftentimes, not only in my boundaries group, part one, but with my clients, the difference between reacting versus responding. So yeah, reactions are typically very automatic, right? They typically don't get us what we want. We get stuck in unhealthy patterns. And so yeah, I can take responsibility for that, but you don't have to take responsibility for your partner's addiction. You don't have to take responsibility for, maybe your past behaviors when there was an intimacy disorder going on and you didn't know, and you were just doing the best you know how to do. And so I think you have to almost kind of wipe the slate clean with going in for, what's occurring in the relationship and in the marriage. And instead of calling it marriage issues, I think we need to talk about this attachment and intimacy disorder that's occurred, as a result of the out of control sexual behaviors and the impact that has on the attachment in the relationship and the betrayal trauma that the betrayed partner is experiencing. That and how we can create safety in the relationship. How do we repair attachment, right? Those are the kinds of things that you focus on. I do like Carol Sheets's early recovery couples empathy model because it really gets and supports not only recovery and making sure it's solid, but also that the betrayed partner has a sense of safety, and really by focusing on empathy and validation. So that's just some of my thoughts. Yes, you can ask him how he's doing. I think every betrayed partner has a right to say, hey, you're in recovery. Tell me about what you're working on. Share with me where you're at. Let me know when you're struggling. Let me be here to support you. Rather than feeling like I can't ever ask. And when you can't ever ask, you feel like you don't ever really know what's going on. That doesn't feel safe. So yes, you can ask how he's doing. Ideally, you would even have check-in several times a week where you're doing something like a Thanos check-in, where you're sharing feelings and you're sharing, awarenesses, you're sharing your needs, you're sharing, what is O? All of a sudden my brain just went, "Meh."
Oh, I can't. Like, I was afraid you were going to ask me. I always have to look it up. So, but I will pull the link. It's on our
Yeah,
website.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
So
I
yeah,
get it, but not right now because my brain's going in so many different directions.
I know, because I'm all into this question too. So
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah.
So that's another way. I have a format I put together with my couples where it's we call it a recovery check-in. And so in this, we literally talk about, what we're learning in recovery and, awarenesses. And if you have had any struggles or slips, if you have dealt with any shame. So I think we have to know where each other's at and learn. Yes, the repair of the relationship is hard, but we have to know what's going on. And so, anyway, those are some of my thoughts.
So, and I'm gonna be less gracious because I'm going like I'm really curious what that marriage issues list looked like because somehow I feel like it was I'm using he and she. He was the victim. All of these things were not meeting his needs,
Mhm.
making excuses for all of the behaviors that he was doing that were unbeknownst to you. So again, I'm not being as gracious. Dr. Rob says often, nothing you did or didn't do caused this. So he had lots of opportunities. He is unhappy with, you're spending more time with, too much time with the kids. Well, guess what? He could hire someone so that you guys can have a date night. He could plan it. Like there's all kinds of things that can be done, but in for addiction, we use that as, she's spending all her time with the kids. I'm not getting my needs met. I get to go over here. And it's justification for it. So I'd be super curious about, from that aspect. But yes, unbeknownst to you. And so you're coming, and somebody shared, and I've used this on webinars before, but like if you're going to a couples therapist, and you're going there, it's like you're in a rowboat. You're paddling like crazy because you're going like, I want my marriage to be better. Like this is, we're at odds. This is not right. And an addict partner who's holding on to the lies, is sitting in the back of the boat, going like paddle harder, paddle harder. You're going in circles because so it doesn't get you anywhere. And unfortunately, often partners are blamed. Well, especially by untrained therapists, it's like, well, you should have more sex with him. Why can't you be whatever? There's whatever the reason is. It doesn't even have to make sense. It's a justification for an addict partner. So here's what I would encourage. I put the betrayed partner work group that starts on February 4th for people newer to this space, that are wondering, like those kind of questions. That's a really good starting point. That's kind of foundational stuff. What sex addiction is and isn't. Porn addiction, sex addiction. It's not about sex. It just like alcoholism isn't. Gosh, this drink tastes so good. So you'll get kind of the primer on that. Debbie's group on healthy boundaries. A great way to. What are internal boundaries? I didn't know until she taught me, so it's like one of those, I'm really aware of them now. I pay attention to those things and work to honor those. So I would invite you to learn more, and you can ask him how he's doing, if it's from the standpoint of you want to have that communication. If it's like he wants to go, oh, I'm having such a hard time, and he gets to play the victim. I would, that would be one of those, yeah, I'm going to go take care of me, things. So this is a general space. Please lean in, get qualified help. If you don't have individual therapists that are trained for this stuff, email tami@seekingintegrity.com. Tell me where you're located and I'll do my best. Oh, it says, yep, my fault, but is anything he has concerns about valid? How do I know? I'm tired of guessing. This goes back to the last question. So
Yeah. Again, I think that you're going to need the help of a couples therapist to kind of separate this and unpack this. But your responsibility is also to be a safe person. Boundaries are about creating safety, so there's security in the relationship. So that might be something you look at, or there are some of my behaviors, would they be considered unsafe? But right now, I think the bigger issue is not about fixing the marriage, it's about addressing the addiction. And for you, it's addressing your betrayal and the trauma that has created. And you might, I don't know how long ago all this information came out, but you might still be in crisis. So right now, you get to focus on you and making you feel better and get to a better place. So that would be my recommendation.
yeah, I'm with Debbie.
Use your
Yeah.
therapist. Let your therapist help you manage that or talk that through or get some clarity on it and some understanding.
Yeah, this is down the road stuff. You can talk about all of those things, and it may be he felt like whatever, so therefore he just, that's, there's a whole bunch. That's really the more complicated stuff right now because it feels like it's early on. So I would really invite you to get the support, and all that set aside. Focus on, I've got the pain of betrayal, all of the lies, all of the stuff that Debbie talked about. That's where you are right now, but you won't always be there. So get the help now so that we've got lots of lifelines and resources for you. So thank you. Great topic. Lots of notes. We'll see
Awesome.
you all next time.
Yeah, bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. Bye.